A thug grabbed a royal guard's arm, convinced his raw power would overwhelm military precision. But in one swift move, the guard revealed who truly held the upper hand and left the entire courtyard in stunned silence. Here's how it happened. But before we continue, let us know in the comments below where you're watching from. Subscribe to the channel as tomorrow, at the same time, we bring you another remarkable display of Royal Guard valour that you won't want to miss. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Buckingham Palace's courtyard as Marcus, the Tank Thompson, shouldered his way through the crowd of tourists, his muscled frame moving with the predatory grace of someone used to intimidating others. At 6'3" and built like a brick wall, he'd earned his nickname in London's underground fighting circuit, where his opponents often learned too late why they called him the Tank. "Move!" he growled, shoving past a young couple trying to take photos. The woman stumbled, catching herself against her partner as Marcus pushed through, his tight black t-shirt straining against shoulders built from years of bare-knuckle bouts and street fights. A tribal tattoo snaked up his neck, disappearing into a closely shaved scalp that bore the scars of countless victories and a few losses he'd rather forget. His eyes, cold and calculating beneath heavy brows, fixed on the royal guard standing at attention nearby. The guard's scarlet tunic and bearskin cap cut a sharp contrast to Marcus's street fighter aesthetic. The ceremonial rifle held with perfect precision, speaking to a different kind of strength than the raw power Marcus had built in basement gyms and back-alley fights. "Well, well," Marcus's voice carried the gravel of too many post-fight cigarettes. "What do we have here?" He cracked his knuckles, a habit from his fighting days that never failed to make people around him flinch. A proper soldier boy, standing all nice and pretty. Tourists began to edge away, recognizing the tension in Marcus's bearing, the same tension that usually preceded violence in the underground venues where he'd made his reputation. A mother hurried her children behind a stone pillar, while an elderly couple exchanged knowing glances before taking position near a palace gate, their bearing suggesting military background. Marcus circled closer to the guard, moving with the calculated swagger of someone testing boundaries, looking for weaknesses. The afternoon light caught the guard's brass buttons, each one polished to perfection. Each one representing everything Marcus despised about authority and discipline. "You know," he announced to no one in particular, though his voice carried across the now quieting courtyard, "I've always wondered about you lot, all that training, all that discipline." He flexed his shoulders, making sure the guard could see the coiled strength in his movement. "But what happens when someone decides to really test it?" The guard remained motionless, eyes fixed forward, but there was something in his bearing, a subtle readiness that only those who'd faced real combat would recognize. Marcus, too focused on his own intimidation game, missed these warning signs as he prepared to begin his real performance. The stage was set for a confrontation between two very different kinds of strength. One built in the shadows of London's fighting underground, the other forged through military discipline and honour. As Marcus, the Tank Thompson, squared his shoulders and took another step closer, the afternoon air seemed to crackle with potential energy, like the moment before a storm breaks. "You ever been in a real fight, soldier boy?" Marcus's voice carried across the courtyard as he edged closer, deliberately invading the space around the guard. Not those fancy training exercises, not those choreographed parades. His lips curled into a predatory smile. "I mean a proper scrap, where there's no rules, no referee, just pure strength." He began a slow circle around the guard, like a shark testing its prey. The tribal tattoo on his neck seemed to writhe with each movement, its dark lines disappearing beneath his shirt, where more ink told stories of violence, amateur championships, underground victories, and the occasional stint in Her Majesty's prison service. 3 years undefeated in the circuit, Marcus announced, loud enough for the growing crowd to hear. "They call me the Tank because I break through any defence, any guard." He emphasized the last word, letting its double meaning hang in the air. Broke a man's jaw last month, another one's ribs the week before, all perfectly legal, of course. His laugh carried no humour. Well, legal enough. The guard's immaculate uniform and perfect posture seemed to irritate Marcus more with each passing moment. In the underground fighting world, such discipline was foreign, weakness even. There, strength was measured in broken bones and bloodied knuckles, not polished buttons and ceremonial rifles. Without warning, Marcus threw a punch that stopped just inches from the guard's face. The crowd gasped, but the guard didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't show any reaction to the fist hovering beside his cheek. This seemed to anger Marcus even more. "Nothing?" he taunted, throwing another fake punch from a different angle. "Not even a twitch? Come on, mate, those instincts must be screaming at you right now." He started mixing in quick feints, the kind that had made him famous in the ring. Any normal bloke would have hit the ground by now. Two older men wearing veterans' pins had taken up position near the palace gates, their weathered faces showing the calm recognition of men who'd seen real combat. One touched the campaign medals on his jacket, his eyes never leaving the scene unfolding before them. "You know what your problem is?" Marcus continued, now standing directly in front of the guard. "All this." He gestured at the uniform, the rifle, the bearskin cap. "It's just for show. In the real world, in my world, there's only one thing that matters: raw power." He flexed his arms, the muscles rippling beneath his tight shirt, "and I've got more than enough to prove it." He began throwing more complex feints, the moves that had earned him his reputation in the underground circuit. Quick jabs that stopped just short, hook feints that whistled past the guard's ear, each one designed to trigger that instinctive flinch response. But the guard remained motionless, his discipline unshakable. "Starting to annoy me now, soldier boy," Marcus growled, his voice dropping lower, more dangerous. "Everyone breaks eventually. Everyone flinches. Everyone shows fear." He moved even closer, his breath hot against the guard's face. "What makes you so special?" The veteran observers exchanged glances, recognizing something Marcus had missed. The subtle tension in the guard's bearing, the barely perceptible shift in his stance. Not fear, but readiness. The kind of readiness that comes from real military training, from facing real threats in real combat zones. "Maybe we need to make this more interesting," Marcus announced, cracking his neck, another pre-fight ritual that had preceded many of his victories. "See, in my experience, when someone doesn't respond to intimidation—" He smiled, showing teeth that had been professionally capped after too many fights. "That's when you have to get physical." The afternoon sun had shifted, casting Marcus's shadow across the guard's polished boots. The crowd had grown larger now, phones lowered, conversations hushed. Even the usual tourist chatter had died away, replaced by the tense anticipation of impending violence. Marcus, the tank! Thompson had built his reputation on breaking people, their bodies, their spirits, their resolve. But as he prepared to escalate his game, he failed to notice what the veteran observers saw clearly. The guard's perfect stillness wasn't the rigid posture of ceremony, but the coiled readiness of a trained warrior. "Tell me something." Marcus circled even closer, his movements becoming more aggressive with each pass. "In all that fancy military training, did they teach you about pressure points?" He tapped his own neck, where a particularly vicious scar marked a victory that had nearly cost him his fighting license, because in my world, we learn exactly where to hit to make a man drop. The crowd had thinned but grown more attentive, creating a loose circle around the unfolding scene. The two veterans had shifted positions slightly, their military training evident in how they maintained clear sightlines while staying just outside the potential conflict zone. Marcus launched into another series of feints, each one more elaborate than the last. His fists whistled past the guard's face, close enough that the guard could feel the displacement of air. "You know what we call this in the circuit?" He demonstrated a particularly complex combination. The fear dance. Because sooner or later, another feint, this one barely grazing the guard's uniform. Everyone dances. The guard's composure remained unbroken, but there was a new tension in the air. Not from the guard himself, but from those who understood what real combat looked like. The veterans' faces had hardened, recognizing the escalating danger in Marcus's increasingly aggressive movements. "Getting proper annoyed now, soldier boy." Marcus's voice had lost its playful edge, replaced by something darker. 8 years in the circuit, yeah? Never lost a fair fight." He emphasized fair with a harsh laugh. "Though fair's a flexible term where I come from." He switched tactics, moving suddenly into the guard's personal space, his face inches from the bearskin cap. "Look at this," he announced to the crowd, "all dressed up like a proper toy soldier." His hand shot out, not quite touching the ceremonial rifle but hovering dangerous close. "Bet this isn't even loaded. Bet you don't even know how to use it properly." The guard's eyes remained fixed forward, but something had changed in his bearing. A subtle shift that only trained fighters would notice. The veterans certainly noticed, one touching his companion's arm in a gesture of quiet recognition. "You want to know what real combat looks like?" Marcus began demonstrating fighting stances, each one bringing him closer to physical contact with the guard. No fancy uniforms, no ceremonial bollocks, just pure... He threw a shadow combination that ended centimeters from the guard's chest. Unadulterated. Another combination, even closer, violence. His next movement brought his knuckles brushing against the guard's scarlet tunic, the first actual contact. The crowd drew in a collective breath, but the guard remained motionless. This seemed to drive Marcus into an even greater frenzy. "Nothing? Not even for that?" He began moving faster, his fighter's grace becoming more predatory. "You know what we call blokes like you in the circuit? Walking targets." His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Because sooner or later, everyone's guard breaks. Everyone's discipline fails. Everyone shows their fear." He launched into his signature combination, the one that had earned him his undefeated streak. Feints and shadow strikes flew past the guard's face, each one designed to trigger that instinctive flinch response. But the guard's stillness remained perfect, his discipline unshaken. "Right then," Marcus's voice had taken on an edge that made several onlookers step back. "Let's see how well that training holds up when things get proper serious." He began bouncing on his toes, another pre-fight ritual that had preceded many of his most violent victories. Because, in my experience, all this discipline, all this ceremony, he cracked his knuckles one final time, it all goes out the window when real strength comes into play. The veterans had shifted again, their movements subtle but purposeful. They'd seen this before, the moment when posturing turns to violence, when threats become action. The guard's bearing had changed too, though so subtly that only trained eyes would notice. His stillness now wasn't ceremonial, but combat-ready, the kind of stillness that precedes explosive action. Marcus the Tank. Thompson had built his reputation on breaking people's defences, on finding the weak point in any guard. But as he prepared for his final escalation, he failed to understand one crucial detail. The stillness he was interpreting as ceremonial weakness was actually the practiced calm of a trained warrior. The kind of warrior who had faced threats far more serious than an underground fighter with something to prove. The afternoon sun cast harsh shadows across the courtyard as Marcus squared up for what he planned to be his decisive move. "Last chance, soldier boy," he growled, all pretense of playfulness gone from his voice. "Show some reaction, give me something, or I'm going to have to show everyone here what happens when ceremony meets real strength." The air seemed to crackle with tension as Marcus shifted his weight, preparing for the physical confrontation he'd been building toward. What he didn't realize was that he was about to learn a harsh lesson about the difference between showmanship and real combat capability, between underground fighting and military training, between intimidation and true strength. "Time's up, soldier boy!" Marcus's voice carried a finality that made several onlookers flinch. With the fluid movement of a practiced fighter, he suddenly grabbed the guard's left arm, his fingers digging into the scarlet uniform with calculated force. Let's see how well that ceremonial stance holds up against some real pressure. The moment of contact seemed to electrify the air. Even the birds had gone silent, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Marcus's grip tightened, his muscles tensing as he prepared to force the guard off balance. The tribal tattoo on his neck seemed to writhe with the effort, his intention clear: to humiliate this symbol of authority by proving its weakness. Know what we call this move in the circuit? His grip shifted, preparing for the takedown he'd used to end countless fights. The Pride Breaker, because once I lean in, he began applying pressure, ready to twist the guard's arm and force him to his knees. There's only one way this ends, with you on the ground, showing everyone here what real strength looks like. The veterans had gone completely still, their weathered faces showing the calm recognition of men who knew what was coming. One touched his campaign medals unconsciously, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. They'd seen this scenario before. Overconfident aggressor, trained soldier, inevitable lesson. Marcus's muscles bunched as he prepared to execute his signature move. In underground fights, this was usually the moment when his opponents realized too late why they called him the Tank. When raw power overwhelmed technique, when street fighting trumped training, his fingers tightened further on the guard's arm, ready to demonstrate the difference between ceremony and real combat. "Last chance to save some dignity," he growled, leaning in closer. "Drop the act now, and maybe I'll let you." That's when it happened. In the underground circuit, Marcus was used to opponents who relied on strength, on endurance, on the ability to absorb punishment. But he had never faced the kind of precise, military-grade response that was about to unfold. He had never experienced the difference between fighting for sport and training for survival. The guard's movement, when it came, was almost too fast to follow. One moment Marcus was preparing his takedown. The next, his world shifted violently as his own arm was caught in a grip of steel. The guard's technique wasn't the showy manipulation of underground fighting. It was the economical, devastating effectiveness of battlefield-tested combat training. Time seemed to slow as Marcus's confident grip was suddenly transformed into a vulnerability. The guard's white-gloved hand had moved with surgical precision, catching Marcus's wrist at exactly the right point to nullify his strength advantage. Before the Tank could process what was happening, his arm was being rotated with mechanical efficiency, his own forward momentum turned against him. The crowd's collective gasp was lost in the rush of blood in Marcus's ears as he felt himself being expertly maneuvered. This wasn't the trading of blows he was used to. This was clinical, practiced disassembly of his attack. The guard's movements spoke of countless hours of drill, of real combat experience, of the kind of training that didn't end in trophies but in survival. Marcus tried to resist, to bring his fighter's instincts into play, but each movement only tightened the guard's control. He had started this confrontation believing he was the predator, only to discover he was desperately out of his depth. The guard's grip was inexorable, his technique flawless, his control absolute. The afternoon sun caught the brass buttons of the guard's uniform as he executed his response, each movement precise and purposeful. This wasn't about showing off or proving dominance. It was the efficient neutralization of a threat, the kind of response that came from real military training rather than underground fight clubs. The veterans exchanged knowing looks as they watched the scene unfold. They recognized what Marcus was about to learn, that there was a world of difference between the controlled violence of street fighting and the lethal efficiency of military combat training. The guard's response wasn't about proving anything. It was about ending the threat with minimal force and maximum control. Marcus the Tank Thompson was about to discover that his underground reputation meant nothing in the face of real military expertise. His world of brutal force was about to collide with a tradition of disciplined combat that stretched back centuries, and the lesson was going to be both swift and memorable. The guard's response was a masterclass in military efficiency. In one fluid motion, executed with the precision of countless combat drills, he twisted Marcus's arm behind his back while simultaneously executing a perfect leg sweep. The movement flowed like water, a combat technique refined through centuries of military tradition and hardened in modern battlefields. Every aspect of the response spoke of real training. The angle of the arm lock, the precise application of pressure, the perfect balance maintained throughout the maneuver. Marcus found himself suddenly airborne, his world spinning as the guard's sweep took his legs completely out from under him. For a man who prided himself on being unmovable, the sensation of helplessness was both foreign and terrifying. The leg sweep, combined with the expertly applied arm lock, sent him crashing to his knees with controlled force. His face contorted with a mixture of shock, rage, and dawning realization as his knees hit the courtyard stones. The guard maintained perfect control of his arm, transitioning smoothly into a textbook restraint position that negated every ounce of Marcus's underground fighting strength. The hold was a testament to real military training, not designed to hurt or punish, but to control with maximum efficiency and minimum force. "What the—" Marcus's words cut off in a grunt of pain as he tried to resist, only to have the guard adjust his hold with mechanical precision. Each attempt to break free was met with subtle adjustments that increased the pressure point control, demonstrating a level of technical expertise that made Marcus's street fighting experience seem amateur by comparison. The guard's control was absolute, each movement calculated not to cause injury, but to maintain complete dominance of the situation. "Allow me to educate you on the difference between showmanship and real combat capability." The guard's voice carried the quiet authority of someone who had faced real battles, not staged fights. His grip remained steady, professional, neither cruel nor unnecessarily harsh, just efficiently immobilizing. The white gloves of his uniform remained pristine, even as they executed the hold with surgical precision. This uniform isn't a costume. And this isn't a game. Every aspect of our training is rooted in real combat experience. Marcus tried to surge upward, attempting to bring his fighter's strength into play, to access the raw power that had won him so many underground bouts. The guard's response was immediate and decisive. A slight shift in pressure that sent waves of pain through Marcus's shoulder joint, forcing him back to his knees. This wasn't the brutal exchanging of blows he was used to in the circuit. This was scientific application of force, the kind taught to soldiers who needed to control situations without causing unnecessary harm. Each movement was calculated, each response measured, demonstrating the vast gulf between street fighting and military combat training. "In your circuit," the guard continued, his voice remaining measured even as he maintained perfect control, "you fight for sport, for pride, for reputation. We train to protect, to serve, to defend. The difference isn't in strength, it's in purpose. Every technique we learn, every hold we master, serves a greater purpose than personal glory." His words carried the weight of real battlefield experience, of training that went far beyond the showmanship of underground fighting. The veterans watched with professional approval as the guard demonstrated textbook restraint technique. One nodded slightly, his campaign medals catching the light as he recognized the same training he'd received decades ago, still being executed with perfect precision. They understood what Marcus was learning the hard way, that real military training was in an entirely different league from street fighting. Your underground reputation, your street fighting credentials, they mean nothing here. The guard's words cut through Marcus's continued struggles like a blade through paper. The hold remained steady, adapting to each attempt at resistance with fluid efficiency. This isn't about who's stronger. It's about discipline, control, and the responsibility that comes with real training. Each move we execute, each technique we employ, is backed by years of refinement and real-world application. Marcus made one final attempt to break free, trying to twist away from the hold with all the strength that had made him infamous in the underground circuit. The guard's response was almost casual. A slight adjustment that sent another jolt of pain through his arm, a reminder that he was completely at the mercy of someone whose training far exceeded his underground fighting experience. The guard's technique showed no strain, no effort, just the smooth application of well-practiced control. 8 years undefeated in your circuit. The guard's voice carried no mockery, just statement of fact, the words punctuated by another precise adjustment of the hold. I've spent that long learning to protect everything this uniform represents. The discipline you mock, it's what allows me to control you without causing serious harm, despite your best efforts to provoke violence. This isn't about proving who's stronger. It's about demonstrating the difference between untamed force and controlled power. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Marcus, the Tank Thompson, terror of the underground fighting circuit, was held immobile by the very ceremonial figure he'd tried to humiliate. The guard's bearing remained professional, his control absolute, showing no signs of strain despite Marcus's continued resistance. Each movement was a demonstration of the vast difference between street fighting prowess and professional military training. Perhaps now you understand, the guard continued, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had faced real combat situations, that true strength isn't about intimidation or violence. It's about control, discipline, and the wisdom to know when and how to use force. His grip remained steady as approaching footsteps announced the arrival of palace security, the hold never wavering in its precision. Your circuit may have taught you how to hurt people. Our training teaches us how to protect them, even from themselves. Every movement, every technique, serves a purpose greater than personal glory. Police officers appeared at the edge of the crowd, quickly moving in to take control of the situation. The guard maintained his hold with unwavering precision until they were in position, then executed a perfect transfer of control, stepping back with military precision as Marcus was secured by the authorities. The transition was smooth, professional, demonstrating yet another aspect of real military training. The ability to coordinate seamlessly with other security forces. "You bloody..." Marcus started to spit out a threat, but the guard had already resumed his post, his bearing returning to ceremonial perfection, as if nothing had disturbed his watch. The only sign of the confrontation was a slight adjustment of his white gloves, every movement precise and purposeful, every action demonstrating the marriage of ceremony and capability that defined the Queen's Guard. The afternoon sun caught his brass buttons as he stood at attention once more, his posture perfect, his discipline unshaken. He had delivered his lesson not through words or showmanship, but through the controlled application of real military expertise. A demonstration of why ceremony and tradition were backed by genuine capability. As the police officers led Marcus away, his stream of threats and curses echoing off the palace walls, the guard remained at his post, resuming his ceremonial stance with the same unwavering discipline he'd shown before the confrontation. The setting sun glinted off his brass buttons, his shadow stretching long across the courtyard stones that had just witnessed a powerful lesson in true strength. "You'll regret this," Marcus shouted over his shoulder, still trying to maintain his tough image even in handcuffs. "I've got people who'll..." His words were cut off as the officers guided him firmly toward their waiting vehicle, his underground fighting reputation doing nothing to impress the representatives of real authority. The two veterans exchanged knowing looks before departing, one touching his campaign medals one final time. They understood what Marcus had failed to grasp. That beneath the ceremonial exterior of every Queen's Guard lay the steel of genuine military training, ready to be deployed with precise efficiency when required. The guard's eyes remained fixed forward, his posture perfect, the only sign of the recent altercation being a slight adjustment of his uniform. The crowd began to disperse, parents explaining to their children in hushed voices about respect, dignity, and the difference between those who display strength and those who truly possess it. As the afternoon light faded over Buckingham Palace, the guard stood as he always had, as others would after him. A living symbol of discipline triumphing over brute force, of tradition backed by real capability, of ceremony underpinned by substance. The incident had lasted barely minutes, but its lesson would echo far longer. That true strength lies not in the ability to intimidate, but in the discipline to control, protect, and serve with honor. What defines real strength? Is it the raw power to dominate others, or the discipline to use force only when necessary and with perfect control? Today's encounter between an underground fighter and a royal guard demonstrated that true strength often lies not in how much force we can exert, but in how well we can control it. As you reflect on this story, consider when you've witnessed strength displayed through restraint rather than aggression. Have you seen moments where discipline triumphed over brute force? Where training and control proved more powerful than raw strength? Remember, these guards stand as living symbols of something greater than themselves. Behind their ceremonial duties lies real training, real capability, and real understanding of what it means to possess power while maintaining control. If this story resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and press the bell icon so you never miss an update. And don't forget to share this video with friends who might appreciate its message. You can also check out more of our content by clicking on the other videos appearing on the end screen right now. Your support helps us continue sharing these important lessons about respect, tradition, and the true meaning of power. Until next time, remember that the most impressive display of strength often comes not from those who seek to intimidate, but from those who maintain their discipline even when tested.